Ladies and gentlemen, today's video is all about everyone, or at least everyone that is into PC gaming, because inside this box is potentially the best PC upgrade you can make to your setup. As we know, having a really expensive graphics card is fantastic, like gaming CPUs, all of the frame rate, hooray! But if you have a pretty old, crap, frankly 1080p display, you're not going to be able to get the most out of it. So what we have on our desk here today is potentially one of the best value gaming monitors you can get. Because at the time of filming, this is just over $200, £200 here in the UK, and this is 1440p, 165 overclockable to 180 Hz, and it's also IPS. So for a lot of people, this is all the gaming monitor you're ever going to need, and it's available on a shoestring budget. So the question is this thing any good, and should you proceed to buy it? Let's get our game on and find out, right after a short word from this video's sponsor. Get your game on with Zotac's RTX 40 series of graphics cards that deliver serious performance in the latest and greatest games. Nvidia's GeForce RTX 40 series graphics cards support both DLSS 3.5 super resolution and frame generation, which can not only boost frame rates, but let you unlock higher quality resolutions for stunning visuals. Not only that, but thanks to Nvidia's RT cores, high performance, real-time ray tracing gives you unreal levels of shadows, reflections and lighting for the true next generation experience. Learn more today with the link down below. So yes, I don't think this monitor is necessarily going to be hitting the headlines for its class-leading specifications, but at the end of the day, as we know, having a larger display, so 27 inches, good image quality and high refresh rate is essentially all you need for a fantastic, better than console level gaming experience. And I mean, to be fair, there's definitely got to be some cut corners here somewhere, right? Because surely you cannot get everything for £200. Hopefully, it's stuff that doesn't matter. I mean, HDR is not going to be the best, I think that's fair to say, for this monitor. I think it does support it with display HDR 400, but if it handles it okay, then, you know, that's okay and acceptable at this price point. The most recent one we actually tested was OLED, 32 inches, 4K, 240 Hz, and that was over £1,000. So to be getting something for essentially 6 times less than that Asus is pretty impressive. So yes, here is a very bog standard monitor in appearance. Personally, I quite like that. I like to see the screen, not like a load of gaming-y features on the side. It does require 4 screws, which is slightly annoying, but they're thumb screws, so you don't actually need a screwdriver to do it. Then grab the base, which is kind of metal, but also a lot of plastic as well, but you're not really going to be touching that, so it doesn't matter. Push it into the stand, and then there you have your roughly $225-ish or £200 gaming monitor, ready to go. And again, it's not the most out there design in the world, but I think actually it looks pretty good. And if you did want to have a couple of these side by side, because you've got that Visa mount, then you can use like a different stand as well to get them looking a little bit neater. Nothing particularly crazy when it comes to the input to this display. You've got 2 HDMIs, DisplayPort, power is standard kettle lead, no brick or anything, but you don't have any USB. So if you're someone that wants to, like, I don't know, KVM switch, or just have like a load of like keyboard and mice and things actually plugged into your monitor and use it as a hub, sorry, you have to go down a different route. As we know, USB hubs aren't exactly expensive. Quiet. Look, because you're setting him off. Quiet. Quiet. But you know what? Rather than just stand at a desk and talk about a monitor in the desktop, let's do the important thing and actually get gaming. And I'm very pleased to say that I've done a lot of the data whilst I was waiting for the games to download. So I will spill the beans as we proceed. But this is actually a good place to start, because this is Ghost of Tsushima. I think I'm saying that right. It's a new game for me. Actually, we've just started a playthrough pretty much. And yes, this is, as you can see, running very well. We have this on a 4090 system, so no issues there. Surprisingly, especially in like more multiplayer titles or things where you're happy to turn the settings down, it's a lot easier than you might think these days to get 1440p at high refresh rates than it used to be. And I've got to admit, I'm kind of speechless really, just how good this monitor looks for the price, because I'm very much used to like playing on an OLED television, OLED monitor at the moment. So this was always going to be a bit of a step down, but I didn't expect it to be as, I don't want to say as close as it is, but not as far away as you would have expected. I mean, the 2 things that are, or maybe 3 things really, that are the most notable for me is just how good the colour is on this. This is a very striking game. It's got brilliant art direction, and it genuinely does look absolutely fantastic on this display. I mean, again, if you've never used a 1440p display, especially on 27 inches, it's pretty much the sweet spot, really. It's regarded as that for very good reason, because you don't have to worry about like image scaling and things, but you get a much higher level of detail. You can sort of see more in the scene, especially if you're playing multiplayer and you're sort of looking into the trees and things like that. That would come in handy, but it's not going to be like crazy difficult to drive. So that's fantastic here. The color's really impressive. I have run those numbers, and we are actually getting over 100% of sRGB, which is very, very impressive. P3 wasn't actually that far behind. Adobe RGB, all of this stuff is not really what you're necessarily going to need for what is a gaming monitor, but if you are like a hobby photographer or something like that, all of that stuff's useful. And obviously when it comes to HDR as well, if you've got a wider color gamut that can be displayed, it's going to make your games look better, even if the brightness of this isn't going to be up to snuff. But I mean, to be fair, we were getting around about 320 CDM or so at max brightness. I will say as well that in my calibration, I did notice there is quite a red tinge. So if you don't have like a way of testing it yourself, maybe turn the red down slightly in the menus, which is very easy to do, and sort of try and get it as close as possible that you can. I think the most noticeable difference for me versus the OLED monitors that I've used though is of course the black levels. Decent enough for an IPS panel, but yeah, if you're coming from something with like a proper variable backlight or dimming system, or of course OLED, then you are going to notice the raised black levels. And I'll also say that if I'm noticing this now, which is in a very brightly lit room on a summer's day, if you're the sort of person that is going to be viewing this in like a pitch black room, you're going to watch movies and things with black bars, that's when you are going to start to notice not only the raised black levels, but then also the potential for IPS glow. But again, for the price point, no issues with that whatsoever, and it's kind of skewed a little bit as well, because a lot of the OLED monitors use glossy panels, whereas this uses a more standard matte finish. That's absolutely fine, got nothing wrong with it, but obviously it doesn't have that same level of contrast as it would as if it was a glossy monitor. Now, of course, the only other thing really that I think we need to talk about before pressing on is actually how the response time is. But again, I've also been quite impressed so far with how it handles motion. So if we move the mouse around quickly, there's not really anything noticeable at all there when it comes to artifacting. If you do want to overclock the monitor, by the way, it's very easy to do so. You just go into the settings, find the option called overclock, and then you can turn this on and it'll go from 165 to 180. So it's not going to make like a drastic difference, but obviously it's always nice to have. But we've actually got this running with our G-Sync enabled. It's a FreeSync premium monitor, but it is G-Sync compatible, which again, I'm very surprised at for a £200 monitor. Motion is handled quite well at sort of faster speeds, but when we do start to slow it down, you can start to see that you do get a little bit more blur. Especially in these more contrasty scenes, you can see that the monitor is now unable to resolve them without having any of the blur associated with it. But again, pretty standard stuff. This is an IPS monitor, so it's going to be, well, generally speaking, in my experience, they're better than VAs. If you do get blurring on VAs, it kind of looks more smeary, it's more contrasty. I don't like that at all unless it's one of the top ones. Whereas IPS I find to be a little bit more forgiving if it does have a little bit of blur. So yes, when it comes to the raw image quality of this monitor, it's not OLED, it's not the absolute best I've ever seen, but I honestly think it is punching well above its weight, as long as you're happy that the contrast isn't going to be quite as good as VA, but obviously you are happy to take the other advantages, especially at this price point. But in order to actually test how this is for sort of Twitch movements and obviously multiplayer gaming, then I'm going to fire up my game of choice at the moment, which I know surprises a lot of you. I'm not a child, I promise. This is some Fortnite no build, and it's a game I've been enjoying a lot. It's the one I play with the boys. And obviously appearance-wise, things are very similar to how they were in Ghost of Tsushima. Still a very nice, bright, vivid display. I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with the raw image quality of this. In fact, I think quite the opposite. I think you'd be very impressed. Oh, there we go, bang. Well, it's certainly past stage 1. Well, I mean, to be fair, it's not exactly doing anything out of the ordinary. It's just being an all-round solid good monitor, really. I would say that I'm very connected to the game. The best PC upgrades are always going to be like the graphics card, the monitor, and then a good gaming mouse, especially if you're playing FPS or something like that. It all comes together, and it does give you, obviously, the best possible chances at being good at the game, assuming your skills, of course, can keep up. And essentially, this is like the most normal monitor really that I've used in the last couple of years, which I think again is a good thing, because a lot of the time I'm testing high-end monitors that really do need to keep up with the best of the best, right? And there's loads of problems that usually come because you spend all of this money and there's still like a fundamental flaw. It could be like the backlight system, or it could be with the case of a lot of VA monitors, that the smearing is just a bit too much for the money. But here, again, it's just punching above its weight with pretty much everything that you want to do. I think it's working really nicely in Fortnite. I don't think anyone's going to have like a huge problem with this per se. One thing that I did notice that I'm not sure if it's the monitor or the PC is that I was getting a little bit of like frame skipping every now and then. I didn't notice this in Ghost of Tsushima, which is why I'm a little bit suspicious. But this is the sort of thing that having that overclock, especially in tandem with the G-Sync turned on, it could potentially give you a few weird issues. That's why it's called an overclock. So if you ever experience like your screen maybe going black or blanking, or as we've said, like you're getting that frame skipping, I'd advise just turning it off, like go back to 165, see if that changes anything, because this is also potentially on a monitor to monitor basis. That's what I would do here, but for the sake of 15 FPS, it doesn't really change my opinion either way. Just make sure that if you are overclocking it, you're aware of the things to look for. But of course, all good things must come to an end, so let's actually try this at the thing that I think it's not going to be very good at, which is HDR. How can I be so confident that this isn't good at HDR when I haven't even tested this yet? Well, it's because HDR is made up of two different components. You've got a wider color gamut, so red, instead of literally being like red, obviously there's a number of reds it can be. There's a wider amount of reds that it can be on HDR, which is good as long as the monitor can actually reproduce the signal that it's sent. But then also HDR really is all about the brightness of the monitor. How bright can it get, and also how like contrasty can it be? You've got all of those really bright whites and the darks at the same time in the same scene. And this is where I just don't think this monitor is going to be able to really do much about it, because okay, the IPS panel might be decent enough, but without a special backlighting system, without it being OLED, you're not going to get the really high brights that's needed for impactful HDR, especially alongside the darks that OLED is able to achieve. So without being able to do either of those, I think this is going to be a little bit muddy, but let's find out. Our game of choice for this is actually going to be Returnal, as I think this is one of the best looking games when it comes to HDR at the moment, because you do have so many different brights and darks all at the same time. And it looks decent. I wouldn't say that this looks bad. A lot of the earlier HDR monitors, if you had it in HDR mode and actually enabled it, the image would actively look worse than it did off, because everything would just become like so muddy and horrible. And here I would say that it's not very contrasty. That's the most noticeable thing about it. I mean, when you look over here, like you've got these dark walls, that should really be as black as possible really, but it's not. It is very, very raised. And also when you look at all of these highlights and things here, if you look at this on a proper HDR screen, this will be, I don't want to say blinding you, but it will be really bright. Whereas the whole image here just looks quite flat and consistent really, which is the whole point of what HDR is trying to step away from, to be honest with you. But as I say, it's not a bad image. I'm not looking at this and thinking, oh, this needs to change. It's just not blowing me away. It's not an exceptional image, and it's not really taking advantage of the HDR. I mean, maybe if you look at the base of the shoes, I'd say that's a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more red than it would in the standard mode, but I think I'm clutching at straws here, really. As I say, it's not bad. It's just, it's not good either. It's bad HDR because it doesn't really do anything else, but it's not a bad looking image, if that makes sense. If you are looking for a specific HDR monitor to take your experience to the next generation level, this ain't it, I'm afraid. So okay then, where does all of this actually leave us? We've got a monitor that, if anything, is pretty boring. It doesn't really do anything better than any other display I've used, but it's also pretty good. There's nothing really wrong with it other than the fact that it can't do HDR properly, but you know, that's all right. That is expected. I think you'd have to spend a lot more money on a monitor to actually get something that I would say does half decent HDR, at least some like maybe £400-500 here in the UK, which is double the cost of this monitor. And that is why I love this thing. As long as you're not expecting it to be as good as an OLED monitor, I do think you are going to be very impressed. I mean, how much to spend on a monitor is always a difficult question, because it is something I would say is worth investing a lot of your budget in, because you're going to be using this hopefully for a very long time. It's what you see, and it doesn't matter how good your PC is. If the screen you have is rubbish, then like everything you play is gonna look rubbish. So I'd always invest a large sum of money, but I think this proves that you don't have to. I mean, the other options really would be to spend less and get a 1080p monitor, but I think if you can stretch to this, you are going to be really happy with this. It's not perfect, as I say. There are going to be some things about it that if you've used higher end monitors, you will miss, but that's not who this is for. This is for someone that just wants a fantastic all-round Quad HD 1440 IPS monitor on a budget and I think you're going to be really happy with it, and it does come highly recommended. But the question very much goes out to you on this. What do you make of our monitor? Do you agree with me that the price point in this, at the moment at least, is pretty insane? Or would you rather spend more, get something that's maybe bigger, ultra wide, HDR? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so let us know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this though, get yourself subscribed, and of course if you do want to check out current pricing on this monitor or anything in my personal gaming PC, you can find that link down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out Zotac 40 series of Nvidia GeForce graphics cards? This RTX 4070 Ti Super is perfect for AAA titles, with massive performance in your favorite games. The Trinity Black Edition packs the Ice Storm 2.0 advanced cooling system, with active fan control that stops spinning at lower loads, and awesome Spectra RGB lighting. It really does look incredible, both on and off the screen. Get yours today with the link down below. But thank you guys so much for watching, we'll catch you in the next one.